Hey guys, so what's been happening in the hobby this week? Well, I thought we'd have a bit of a discussion on the new season for Age of Sigmar, the Scourge of Ghyran, or whatever it's called, the second season in this edition of the game, and go into my early thoughts on the season, as I do when we have these new seasons, and talk a bit about the game. And while we do that, I'm going to be painting these Palladors in my custom scheme, as I do on this channel, as many of you have seen before, I'm sure, and we're going to be doing the color glazing into the brass armor and all that sort of thing, and go through it. These little bird mounts we're going to be doing in a blue black to go with the theme of my army and that sort of thing. So that should look pretty cool. This the same color that I did on Krondus. If you want to check that out, there's videos there on the Krondus dragon and how I did that. It'll be the same sort of process, but here we're doing it on a mount like this. So it should be a fun one. A nice little bit of dry brushing, some line highlighting, very quick, and you get these done really fast, which I think is cool. So, and it's great that this season I'm finally able to use these Palladors, or this edition, because they're finally actually really cool in the game and do a lot for you. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I'm looking forward to adding these to the collection. I think they're cool models. I don't know how long they'll last in the game. I mean, if you're watching this video in years to come, they may not even be in the game. They might have been legended by then, because they are old models. So there's a bit of a theme in Games Workshop for removing old models, but they're still really cool to paint. And I don't really worry too much about that. I really like the model, so I wanted to paint it regardless of how long it stays, in the game or whatever. But yeah, they're really cool. So I thought we'd have a bit of a chat and get these painted. I haven't done a big batch paint like this in a while, so that's pretty cool as well. So we'll go through and do that, and yeah, just chat about the new season. I played a couple of games, so yeah, we'll get into it and see how I go with discussing this, and give you my closing thoughts at the end, and the final paint jobs and that sort of thing. So yeah, pretty cool. All right, let's get started, eh? Okay, so the new season. Well, what a big change. It's almost like this edition of Age of Sigmar is finally underway. That's what it kind of feels like. And, many other commentators out there that have been speaking on this season are sort of talking about it in that way as well. And I agree. It definitely feels like the edition is finally starting to get some legs under it, and we're getting to see what the edition is really like. So, is that good or bad? I don't know yet. School's out for me on that one. I think I've talked about this before. I was a little bit lukewarm on the edition as it released. Fourth edition hasn't been, as impactful on me in terms of excitement as, let's say, when I was getting into third. But that might be just because third edition was my first edition for Age of Sigmar, and so you get that sort of honeymoon thing, and it colors your view a little bit. But, it is definitely growing on me. There's definitely positives here, and there's a few cons, but, the positives are pretty good, and I can see value out of this edition. So it is definitely growing on me. It's not something that I'm growing colder on. I'm warming to it. But I have needed a little bit of time to get myself into the rhythm of this edition and understand how I was going to go about it, because a lot of things have changed fundamentally in the way you play. And Stormcast, no exception. You definitely have some differences there in how you go about doing your games. And every faction basically has this conundrum where you're sort of relearning or refiguring out how to go about your games and how you actually do it. So and that's from list writing all the way through to the gameplay. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride. But I finally had some games. I've had 2 games now, and I'll probably be getting a third as of this video. Probably a third game, in. Well, I would have already had the third game, but as I'm recording, probably in about a week's time of this recording. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, and I'm starting to get my feel around it, and we'll talk about my list and what I ran and that sort of thing in a second. But we'll start with just my general impressions of this season and how I think it's going and all that sort of thing, and the battle tactics and that sort of stuff. I'm not going to go into great detail here because there's many other videos on YouTube that really go into deep detail about that. Vince on his channel, he goes into it deep. You've got the Stormcast guys, the Storm Keep guys. They also go into it pretty deep as well, and give you the overview of all that sort of stuff. So those 2 channels especially will give you a good loadout on what the season's about. And in Vince's latest video, I think he on his Wednesday show, he gave you a breakdown of the number of all the different stats, like the number of objectives per, like on average in the missions of this season, and all that sort of thing. So you can understand how the battle tactics interact with the missions and what you're likely to get out of it based on that on scoring. So that's more of a competitive kind of viewpoint of this season, I guess. And, the season is designed around competitive play, so that's obviously useful. So if you're into that sort of thing, then I'd say that video is pretty useful just to give you some data on actually what it is, rather than just going from a feel thing. So, you've got a little bit of experience there. Those guys obviously played a lot. Vince played a lot. So he's giving you that experience as well as that data. So that's a pretty good one there to look at, I'd say. But apart from that, I'm just going to give you my 2 cents on the whole thing and how I feel about it. So I think that's where we'll begin and talk about that. So the positives, what do I like about it? Well, I think what they've done with the missions and the terrain rules especially is a wonderful addition to the game, because it's something that's been glaringly obviously overlooked and not really locked in on in previous versions of this game, either in this edition or in the previous one. Or I'm assuming from what people have talked about, even in second edition or the Wild West of first edition and the Zero edition, which had nothing, no rules or anything in it. So, it's never really had a very strong set of terrain rules and never really had a very strong set of missions. And I think this is the first time we've seen them sort of lock in on trying to elucidate some strong verbiage around how missions and terrain actually interact in the game and how it should work. And a lot of that just comes down to adding obscuring to a bunch of terrain, which, is what it's always needed. My own personal games, I would always put that sort of thing on the terrain, because when you start creating corridors and pockets of open space and closed space, that's where the game starts to become really interesting. And I think that's something that's now being explored in more detail in a way that's unique to AOS, as opposed to something like 40k, where they sort of end up with all of these L shapes. In AOS, we can have more unusual shapes for our terrain a little bit. They're a bit more sort of ovoid and that sort of thing. And that makes for more interesting boards, I think. I think the L shapes are good and solid for what 40k needs to do, but definitely are functional. But the AOS thing allows for a little bit more room of creativity in terms of the shapes. I think that's really nice, and that creates a more fun board, I feel, just generally speaking. And the way this is turning out, it's looking good. So you've got a lot of ways to jump either side of terrain and create these little sort of moments of tactical decision making and priority targeting to force someone to go one way instead of another, or hide one area and jump out another, that sort of thing. So I like that sort of cloak and dagger game that's being developed in this season. I think that's really good. I think it will continue, and it's encouraging a certain type of play style and different units that are good for those sorts of boards. So like the Palladors that I'm using right now, a great example of a unit that works really well in a season like this. And so that's a positive. The missions and the terrain rules are definitely a welcome addition to the game. I think that's great, and that really does, I think, lift the whole edition for me. The only other area that I really want to see it further expanded, although they have added, which we'll go into the next pro, is list writing. I really want them to keep focusing on that, because for me, list writing is one of the biggest parts of this game. It's something that I really love, and the more open and expressive that is in terms of list writing, the better the game is, I feel, for me anyway. It's a huge part of the time I spend with the hobby is list writing and, vibing with your friends and, going back and forth on the pros and cons of the list and all that sort of thing. It's a bit like fantasy football, right? Like you're sort of like vibing out on the imaginary world of these lists, and you're going back and forth. And that's a huge part for me. My 5 battle round game really starts with picking the faction, and then it's list writing. That's a heavy part of it. That's like battle round 2, right? So battle round 1 is picking faction. Battle round 2 is the list writing stage. Then battle round 3 is deployment. Positioning and deployment in that early part of the game. And then my fourth round is the first turn, the first battle round, and my 5th round is the second battle round. And everything after that is kind of like an extrapolation of how well you did on those first 5 things. And then then it plays out usually the way it should. So if you've chosen, you've lined up your list writing with your faction and you've made those correct decisions. This is talking from a competitive point of view. Then that's gonna, and then you deploy that really well, and your first 2 turns of the game are executed in the way they need to be for the list that you've written. Then the end result should be, apart from unlucky dice rolling and some unlucky moves or maybe some small mistakes, you should end up with a really good game, even if you lose. It should be a competitive game. It should be close. It should give your opponent a very satisfying game, regardless of win or lose. But you should be in a strong position to win, which is why it will be a competitive game. It will be close. It'll be a nail biter, and we'll go into that in a second. But that's what my games were, the first 2 games that I played, and part of that comes down to the pros of the third pro we'll talk about here, which is, even though it's also a con, is the sort of hard railing of the battle tactics and how it forces you into a very specific kind of list building. But if you play the list the way it needs to play to score, you suddenly start to get a much more nail-biting game in that sense, in that competitive sense. And I think that's a pro, but there is also a con there. So we'll talk about that in a second. But the second pro is the list writing, and they've given us a whole bunch of new war scrolls, and I think that's a really wonderful thing. That's needed, right? So we need more war scrolls, more diversity amongst the battle tomes. That would be great, because one area that this edition does kind of fall down on compared to, let's say, third edition or second, is that the battle tomes are a little bit light, in general, and the war scrolls don't have as much on them. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to get the juice out of it. You don't get that variety as much. It's a bit more vanilla, a bit more straightforward. And so that's, for me, an area they can continue to improve. And so the new war scrolls for the Scourge of Ghyran, these other war scrolls, alternative ones, are a really great addition to the game. And I think that's really good. And then, as I said, the other pro we've got now is, that the honing of those battle tactics in your list writing stage enable you then, and if you execute that, you do get a really strong kind of, thematic way your army is going to play. The downside of that, so we'll move into some cons now, and we'll talk about that. But the main con there for that battle tactic one is, or the list writing to battle tactic to playing, is that it is railed. It's a good and a bad thing. It means you don't really have the opportunity to do anything else but that particular order in the way the battle tactics work and the way your list is going to function. It doesn't have the option to do something else. It must do that particular sequence. And that can, I guess, jar some people or jar you if you've been playing it for a while. So what it really encourages you to do then, you have to rebuild a new list that plays a different way. So it's almost like you've got to create these small deck builds like in a card game, and each deck only works one specific way. And then if you want to do something different, you actually have to make a new deck and then start again and then go again. And then you get a new variety, a new way in which the tactics play out. But you don't have it's not really a mixed arms list. You kind of, it may look like that in terms of the units you're taking, but the way it actually functions on the table isn't really like a mixed arms army. It's gonna always do the same type of thing each time, for better or worse, depending on how well, again, you position in that early part of the game and how well your target priority is over those first couple of turns, and then you get the outcome. So yeah, that's sort of the con there as well. It is a bit restrictive in that way, but it does make for a pretty close game, and we'll talk about that in the second half of this. So yeah, the main other con, I guess, which was also the pro because they've released war scrolls, is apart from the railing of the battle tactics and how they work with your list writing, is list writing itself. And for me that's a big one, right? I really love writing lists. So and it's not as big for everyone. Some people that's not as big of a priority for them. They're okay with it, and but for me, I like a lot of options there, and so. I think that's where the improvement needs to be, for me anyway, over the edition, is to make sure the battle tomes have as much optionality in them as possible, so you can actually do some of these battle tactics, because some of the cards, we'll talk about it in a second, are extremely difficult. They're not easy. They're not an easy thing to actually accomplish. And your list has to be very, very fine-tuned to actually get all 6 of these, or even 5. It's very, very difficult. It's not easy. None of them are an easy thing. We'll talk about a couple of them now in a second that are the obvious picks, but all the other ones, you pretty much have a hard block or a hard stop on the second battle tactic on the card. So out of the cards, you know, you've got the 3 on the cards, and then the second one in that list is, generally speaking, it sort of is in contrast or at odds with the first one, you know, or at odds with the third one, or at odds with the other card that you've got to play. So there's like a lot of non-synergistic kind of vibes going on between these cards. Some do go together, but there's always this sort of slight jarring or push and pull or tug of war between what you want to do on one card versus another. And so that's a real problem, because there's no flow of it as exactly. So you've got to be very careful. And that means writing a list that really works for that. So yeah, I think the list writing, I want to see it open up more so that you can write those other lists for those battle cards. And I think that's the last bit we'll talk about here before I get onto my games and all of that is, talking about the battle cards. And, they're both a con and a pro in some ways. As I said, it does give you this sort of thematic way you can write the lists, but it is still very narrow. And I would have loved to have seen them just allow you to score them in any order. Or maybe you've got to score the first one, but then the other two you can pick which one you do. I feel like that would be nicer, because there's many moments in the game where you could complete the third one but not the first two, or you could complete the second one. Like in my game I'm about to talk about, my opponent is actually my brother. He couldn't start his battle tactics until really late in the game, because his first one was so restrictive in terms he needed to he had the wrathful cycles where he's got to have more objectives than the opponent, right? And we're on one of the missions where there's only 2 objectives, and we're playing the long board edge one. I can't remember what the name of it is, but there's lots of terrain and we've only got 2 objectives. So he basically had to walk. He's playing Cruel Boys versus Stormcast, and he had to walk all the way over because I was blocking him out for teleports, and he had to walk all the way over to the other side of the board just to start scoring. And he ended up winning that game. It was very close. We'll talk about it in a second, but that was a real problem in terms of just being able to do anything. So there was a lot of waiting around in that game in the early part, tense, but there wasn't a lot of scoring happening. It was low scoring for the first part, which isn't a bad thing all the time, but if you were playing hundreds of games of this, I think you would get a little bit bored of that. So I feel like a little bit more opening up of what you could do, like maybe unlock the first one and then you can sort of pick and choose which of the second 2 you want to do, because that would just give you more options and open up a few more list varieties there without having to really change anything or do anything to the game. So they're my list on that. And in terms of the battle cards, so we'll just talk about that. I think obviously Intercept and Recover is the one that the default that pretty much every faction will take as one of your cards, just because it really does push a very fair game, and it's interactive for both players. You put the treasures on your opponent chooses which have the treasures, and you go after them, so you're killing units, which what you want to do, you're removing stuff from the board, and you're going to do that anyway, and it gives you a reward for that. But there's a lot of counterplay and a lot of back and forth, and I think it's just a good all-round battle card for the season, because it's something you don't have to think about really. It's something you're going to pick up as you play, and I think that's really nice, and that puts all of your mental energy onto the other card. And I think that's why that one's a really nice one, and it does also force you into a turn-by-turn situation. So double turns become very special and the kind of thing you only do if it's going to give you a win, or it's going to put you into a very advantageous position. Otherwise, you won't do it, because it's going to ruin the Intercept and Recover. You're going to lose a treasure that you can potentially score, and that battle round you can't do battle tactics anyway. So you're doubly losing if you do it. So you have to be in a very good position. So it forces a very fair game of Warhammer, which I really like. So I like that one a lot. I think that's a good one, and pretty much most people are going to pick that. And then the second one would be Scouting Force. Scouting Force is by far for most armies in the game that have access to some kind of teleport or fast-moving units of any kind, this one is going to be your second one ultimately, because it just fits well into that style. And don't be fooled by this particular card. It sounds very sort of dancing around the edges and doing these different things, but it's actually a very aggressive card, and it works very well for highly aggressive lists as well, because what you actually have to do is lift your opponent's army out of their territory in order to just contest and control those terrain and objectives that are there and do the thing that you're trying to do. It's actually very hard to do that, and you need a very, very strong, almost alpha striking list, or one that can do a very deep sort of penetrating hit, very targeted hit, scalpel type hit on your opponent's army in order to break it open so you can actually get to those areas you need to get to. And often, if you've got Intercept and Recover, the units you want to actually take out that have the treasures are usually, tucked away in that area, especially when you're playing something like Cruel Boys, which is going to have a very castle beginning. And so you have to crack open that egg, and get to it. So I think that one's a great one. And then the other ones that you might want to pick, the others that are in the ballpark, although have really problematic beginnings or middles, are things like Attune to Ghyran. It is possible to do, but again, it's tricky because the seize the center thing is very, very problematic. Don't ever pick this one if you're new to the game. You never want to have any units in the center of the board. It's a bad idea. That's a kill box. Tactically in warfare, you don't want to be in the kill box. So that's not a good tactic and not a good card if you don't very heavily spec your list into doing this. And the only ones that can really do it are things like Nurgle and some of the Horde armies that are able to clog up the mid board and hold that area, or do lots of counter beta charges from that, because the next tactic on that list is the 2 fight 2 retreat thing. So you need an army that can do that, this sort of concertina back and forth and holding that mid ground. So there aren't a lot of armies that can actually do that well in this edition, so I wouldn't suggest unless you're going to very heavily spec into it, but it is possible. And then the other one is, I think it's Restless Energy, which is possible, and Master of the Paths is okay, but also problematic and very difficult if you don't have teleporting. And that's the one that you need to be in the 3 corners, which is very hard to do. Stormcast can do it. Things like Cruel Boys can do it, and others like that have a lot of teleporting, Skaven, etc. But it's still a very problematic one, and you're probably not going to get all of it on there. So I think basically most people are going to come down to Intercept and Recover and Scouting Force, or if you don't have those faster moving units, you might go for Attune to Ghyran as like a more sort of midfield grind list, or the Restless Energy or Master of the Paths one, where you're trying to basically table your opponent, so more aggro, aggressive, sort of tabling kind of list. And that's the sort of thing you're probably going to end up going for. All of them actually are very aggressive battle tactics and force you to really go after your opponent. So there isn't a lot of like sitting around doing things in the back. You're not really going to be doing that. You're going to be creating quite aggressive lists. So that's an interesting change for the game that is really quite obvious once you start playing these battle cards. You'll start realizing how aggressive you have to be to actually get the points out of it. So now we'll move on to my games, and we'll have a bit of a chat on that, and then we'll see this one out. Otherwise, I'll be talking about this forever. Okay, so my games. So the first one was a test round, and I took the Intercept and Recover and the Scouting Force. And so my list has, the Palladors that you're seeing me paint now. I have Yndrastra, who's a great sort of scalpel kind of damage dealer for big targets. Then I've got my Knight Judicator, which I love. He's my pet unit. I really like that I can use him again. Even though he's got a very stripped down war scroll, he's got just enough damage out of him to make him useful. And in the way I use him, he's useful. And then I have 2 unreinforced concussor units, and for basically midfield protection and capturing and things like that. And then I have 3 units of Soulsworn, Quest to Soulsworn. And these units are what I think Stormcast should be. They basically have a war scroll that says to me, I'm a Stormcast. That to me, they epitomize what they all should be. They should be the basic units. I feel like you should just have, like in my eyes, their war scroll, like pretty much all the units should have that. They should have a single use teleport that's not on a dice roll, that all of them can use even all in the same turn, because it's not army locked or anything like that. You can use multiples in a turn, and you can do it from combat, you can do it outside of combat, just a one-use teleport that gets them out of dodge and moves them somewhere else. I think it's great. They have damage 2 on their profile, Ren 1, they've got 3 attacks, 3 wounds. They're a great little 6-man unit that does what you want it to do. They're an independent operator, and they even have a ward save. If you can get onto the quest mark objective, you get a ward save. So to me, they epitomize what a Stormcast is and what they do. And I really wish that more of the units were like that. It would make Stormcast feel a lot nicer for those infantry units. Like, you could have 2 wound versions of them. You could even have one wound versions of them for the lower grade guys. You could have 4 wound versions of them, and just give them a different special rule. Like, maybe some have rend 1 monster, maybe some have, whatever, +1 damage against certain targets, etc. You have a range of additional abilities you could put on them, but I would be much happier to pay for varying wound levels and slightly different special rule options with a damage 2 base, Ren 1 damage 2, and a single use teleport without a dice roll. I think that would be amazing for all those infantry units. Then you would take them, you would have more of them. You'd have your Liberator version, you'd have your Vanquisher version, you'd have all that, and it would just make the whole army feel so amazing. And then the Lord Relictor is free to be given a different kind of role and other prayers that make him more interesting, rather than just the teleport spell, because then you're not reliant on him to do that sort of thing. And they've been moving away from the way Relictors work anyway. You don't get a 2-up reroll anymore like in 3rd edition, so you are relying on the porta potty, the terrain piece to teleport your units around. You're relying on other means to get around the board, and so Vanguard Wing, etc. So I'd love to see that. But anyway, so I'm fighting against Kruleboyz. Kruleboyz, he's got a reinforced unit of Gut Rippers. He's got the Vulture kill boss. He's got Gobsprak. He's got a Killbow. He's got Bolt Boys. He's got monster killers galore. He's got the troll with the little guy on the back, and it's nasty. It's a nasty army in this edition, and fighting on the long ways on the board, from end to end, where it's narrow and long, was really tricky. He screened me out, I screened him out, so my questers go in the back, they screen out the backboard because they can jump at the end. The idea is to screen out there, the Palladors, the Injustra, and the Judicator, focus in on one point, on one flank, and remove whatever's there, and then break open a flank and crack the egg, as it were. And that's what I did. He screened me out well. He made the game go right to the end. So it was pushing right in this is in the second game, right to the end of the game. From 3rd turn onwards is where all the real scoring was, and it was a very tense game. I managed to get in there. I jumped over onto his side. He managed to walk over to my side and take my objective, but by then I was all on. So there was no one there. His orcs were just standing around. That was scoring, but there was no one to attack because I jumped away, which is a great tactic that the Soulsworn can do. And I was right in his lines in the back, trying to pick up those treasures from his Shaman and the other and the Vulture and so on that had the treasures on them. So because we were both taking Intercept and Recover, he had the one where it was Wrathful Cycle, so he had to come across the board and try to take the other objective just to start his card, and I had Scouting Force as the other one. So it was a real back and forth, very, very close game, and I found that it really interesting. But you really did have to work towards making sure your list functioned in that way. You didn't really have an option to do anything else. Like, he had to come across the board, which allowed me to then jump away, which is how my list works. I know from these battle tactic cards that almost all of them force you out of your territory at some point, and so having questers in the back that can just jump over and jump into their territory late game to achieve those Scouting Force battle tactics is a really great thing. So I'm expecting to see more Stormcast players use them because it's such a solid tactic for mid to late game. And they're you're not going to get touched for a long time, so they can sit there and screen things out and then jump away at the end. So it was a really, really fun game, and I enjoyed it. But there was a lot of tense moments, and again, everything had to work exactly as it needed to. And in the end, the mortal wound output of the Kruleboyz and the fight last really did take its toll on the Stormcast. So even though I positioned well and I did all the right things, it just ticked over into his favor by the end, because I just didn't have the staying power to really break through. I didn't quite crack the egg. I got a little hole in there. I got in, but I wasn't able to actually break it right open and get the yolk. So and so he was able to get away with the win at the end. But it was very tense, back and forth. There was a point where he needed to make a retreat move with his kill boss on Vulture, and he made the 3-up roll. If he hadn't made it, we mathed it out. It might have been a very different game, but he managed to get out, and that meant that, and due to later him getting priority, it allowed him to then finish off most of my Soulsworn in the backfield there, and that helped him get the win because he got the treasures off them. All my Soulsworn ended up having the treasures, so it was a way to keep it away from him, but he ended up being able, because that vulture was still alive, he was able to then go after them, and with the help of some monster killers, achieve a victory there. And so yeah, it was very tightrope walking, you know, on a knife's edge the whole time. So yeah, really cool. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to my third game, and I'll be definitely coming back. We'll be coming back again to talk about this in months to come. I've got a really cool idea for a conversion on a Soulsworn unit, so you're going to see that on the channel at some point, and we'll talk about it then, and we'll see how, you know, my quest is going as I go forward with this season and play games. But you know, all in all, I am very positive about it. It is reinvigorating my energy to want to, you know, dig into this season and this edition of the game and play around with it some more, and see what I can get out of it. As well with Soulblight as well. I've got the Soulblight stuff there, so I definitely would like to try out Soulblight this season, because they look like they're very strong for this season. So that'd be fun to see what I can do. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So if you're on the fence about the season or about this edition, you know, I'd say this is a good time to really play around with it, because there's enough there to actually start like seeing what this edition is about, and whether it's for you or not, or whether you want to do it. So it's definitely interesting. If I'll say that, for all its pros and cons, it's definitely interesting, which is great. That's a good thing for a war game. So yeah, I'll stop waffling on now. We'll go to my closing thoughts, and we'll see how I've gone with these Palladors, and yeah, we'll see how we go with it. But yeah, it's looking cool. It's looking like a good season, and I'll look forward to chatting with you guys again once I've got a bit more games under my belt, and we can chat about some questers and some other things going on, whatever games I played from now till then. So yeah, okay, let's get these closing thoughts done, and we'll see how we go. And there we go, some Vanguard Palladors added to the pile. Let's take a look. So yeah, this has been a little bit of a grind. It's taken a bit longer than I thought it would, but a little bit over a week, I think, to paint these guys. They're still pretty good, but I was hoping to get them done a little bit quicker. But in the meantime, I've managed to play a couple of games. So yeah, it's been pretty good. These guys really do well in games at the moment. And yeah, my opinion of this season is definitely improving as I play those games. We'll talk about that in future videos. I've got an idea for a few more videos on this season. So yeah, we'll pick this topic up again, and I'll discuss this list that I've been using. But it's working very well. These Palladors are definitely awesome if you're playing Stormcast. But yeah, these ones are really cool, and I'm happy to put them, you know, now painted into the list and that sort of thing. It's pretty cool. But I did say at the beginning of this I was going to use blue blacks, and I've gone for neutrals on this because I'm going to add the Stormstrike Palladors in as well. We'll do a video on those, and yeah, and they're pretty cool, and so I thought I'd do those with the blue blacks. So for the neutral blacks, you could take a look at the Karazai video I did a while ago, and I'll put a link in the top right hand corner there for you if you want to check that one out. But you know, the Cronus one is still good, and the blue blacks will definitely be doing again. So for anyone that's new to the channel, we do both. I love doing black, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, but these ones are good, and they'll fit nicely into my army. I think that's pretty good. So yeah, just a few ideas on AOS in this season, and as I said, since playing those couple of games, it's definitely improved my opinion, and we'll be talking about it more as the season goes on. So yeah, I mean, it's going for a year, so we've got plenty of time to do some videos and have a discussion on it. So yeah, but I'll leave a nice image for these ones at the end as I normally do in the paint list. But hey, if you've enjoyed this, please hit the like button, subscribe, and it really helps me out. And I guess I'll catch you on the next one.